Okay, now that it's 5 minutes after, let's get started. So thank you everyone for coming to be with us here today. I see that we have quite a lot of people, and so this is very exciting for us since this is the first year that we're doing these webinars. So thanks to everyone. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Emily and I'm a second year graduate student here in the physics department. And I'm one of the students who's been helping to organize these webinars. So let's just quickly do a poll just to get to know everyone a little bit better. So if everyone can please visit the link that I've just shared in the chat, you can write where in the world that you're connecting from, and we can just have a nice get to know everyone a little bit better. So I see that we have over 70 responses so far. It's a lot of international students, so that's really great to see for us. Just a few more seconds. Great, so it looks like we've reached students from all around the world. So we're really happy to see that. And we hope that people from anywhere in the world can learn something from the webinar today. So let's move on to the next question. So which disciplines are you most interested in applying to? So that should be visible now, I believe. I see there's a lot of quantum information people. Just a few more seconds. Great, so it looks like we have people who are interested in all of our divisions, so that's great to see. So let's get started. So today we'll have a 15-minute presentation about the application process as a whole, and then we'll get into the bulk of our webinar, which is answering questions from you guys, because we would like to know what you guys would like to hear about. So first of all, let me have Mason introduce GAGA, which is the student group here today who will be discussing basically all the initiatives that we are doing to help support the graduate admissions process. So Mason, could you share your screen?
Can people see this?
Yep.
Cool. Hi everyone. Thanks for coming along to the webinar, wherever you're calling from. I assume there's a whole range of time zones. So if you're joining us kind of late in the night, I especially very thankful for that. So as Emily was saying, so this is part of GAGA. So it's a fun name, but it stands for the Grads Advising Graduate Admissions. And we've been working very closely with the department, including Sydney Miller here, who we'll introduce soon, and also Matt Evans, who is the grad admissions chair, and trying to reduce the barriers to application to MIT. Because I myself am an international student, and even when I was back home in New Zealand, I had no idea what the application process was like. I barely knew what the GRE was, even in August of my application year. So I wish something like this existed back then, but now we have 3 initiatives that we provide to any prospective applicants applying to our program or thinking of applying to our program. So one is the very one that you're here right now for. So it's the webinar. So webinars are great to kind of access the information in a very open way to as many people as possible all around the world with no constraints on being physically here at MIT, even though that would be the most ideal, but I will have to go with this. Then the second one is a FISCAP mentorship program where we would pair current grad students with prospective applicants to guide them through the application process. And in order for those applicants to get as much out of the mentorship program as possible, it will be great or will be most ideal for those students to be thinking of applying to grad school this year, because this is the core audience of who we're trying to reach to. And then the last one is a Q&A service, which we collaborate with staff members in the physics department to answer questions about what student life is like at MIT and what the culture is like around Cambridge and Boston, which is where MIT is based here. So all of the information is on our department website. I think I was keeping track of the statistics of where people are getting information from about our webinars, and a lot of you are getting that information from our department website. So so that all the information is listed in detail, and if you have not, I definitely recommend you to take a look at the department website, which I will link soon.
Great, thank you, Mason. Just a quick reminder to everyone throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please submit them at this link. It will help us to better track people's questions, and we can answer them in real time. So next, I would like to introduce Sydney, who is our graduate program administrator, without whom the department would basically not function. So Sydney, could you say a quick few words about what it is that you do? Sydney, I think you're muted.
That's actually one of my specialties, being muted. Sorry. Okay. I got it. Woo. All right. My name is Sydney Miller, and I'm the staff member in charge of providing information for prospective applicants, guiding people through the application process, the transition to MIT, and I support current graduate students when they arrive here. When you write to physics-grad@mit.edu, I am the one responding to your email. That's my short introduction, and I'm here to answer any questions people have as well.
Great, thank you so much, Sydney. So now let's get started. So first we'll have a 15-minute presentation given by student members of the admissions committee. So this will just be a very general presentation about the application process. And then afterwards, we'll have the Q&A session. So
okay, so I'm actually gonna start off, and I think I did not actually introduce myself properly. So my name is Mason. I'm a 4th-year PhD in the astrophysics division, and I use he series pronouns. Let me get Rahul to introduce themselves and Wenza as well.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Rahul. I am a 3rd year in Astro. My pronouns are he, him, his.
Hi everyone, I'm Wenzer. I'm a 3rd year graduate student doing particle theory, and I use she, her pronouns.
Excellent. So yeah, so as Emily was saying, the plan is that we'll give a roughly 15-minute presentation on the overall grad school logistics stuff, and I guess more pertinently what the admissions committee is looking for. And then we'll spend the remainder of the 2 hours answering any questions you may have about the process, including questions that are on Slido, of which there are many. So thanks for sending in those questions. So before we go on, I think we should outline a couple of disclaimers that we should point out. So first of all, Rahul, Windsor, and I are grad student members of the admissions committee. And while we're on the committee, what we're saying today is not the official stance of the admissions committee with a capital A and C. We are giving advice based on our experiences in serving on the committee, and in particular, the three of us read over 1,000 applications in depth, and that's where we're drawing a lot of our experiences from. So the last thing I'll say as well regarding this is that the admissions process is very stochastic. It can vary very, very significantly, even within similar groups of applicants. So that's one thing to note. Also, then in that case, should not take things too personally when it comes to rejections. And the unfortunate reality is that the vast majority of applicants, including all of you, of course, are very, very highly qualified. And it's just a matter of a very limited number of spaces that we have here in the department. Now, another question to ask is whether grad school is right for you. So one thing, grad school in the US is not, I guess, like the programs that are in the UK or in Australia, New Zealand, where the programs are roughly 3 to 4 years. And I usually think of them as project-based, whereas in the US, I think of it more as program-based, meaning that you are really connecting more with your advisor in the other programs outside the US. Whereas here, it's a bit more holistic, it's a bit more kind of broad-based, if I can put it that way. So then the question is, again, is grad school right for you? There are many valid reasons why you would want to go into grad school. Most of you are thinking of doing a research-based career probably to expand your repertoire or stay on academia or doing some form of cutting-edge research. You are welcome to ask for my answer, in Q&A or whatever. But the big thing is that, again, in the US, the degree takes 5 to 6 years, and more likely than not, it will be closer to that 6-year mark. And, it's not insignificant to say that the 5 to 6 years is a very significant fraction of your life. Sorry, it's not going to go through the slides. So, it's a kind of a scary question to ask about whether you're ready to commit, 5 to 6 years to honing these skills, because you encounter a variety of situations in those 5 to 6 years. We are not going to pretend that graduate school is going to be all kind of fun and sunshine and roses. There will be times where experiments will not work, or sometimes, you might get, feel pressure to publish. So, but overall, you want to be clear on why exactly you are doing what and why exactly you're doing the PhD. Next.
Yeah, before I move on to these slides, Mason, quick thing. Sometimes I can only see like half the slide. I'm not sure if you're switching between windows or something.
Sorry, I kind of was.
Okay, all right. Okay, yeah, so now let's, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what are the different parts to applying to the MIT Physics Department for graduate school. The first component is going to be the online application, where we ask you to fill out a lot of biographical data. With our application, we also require an application fee. At MIT, this is $75. The fee can vary from school to school. Some go up to around $100. So you shouldn't be afraid to ask for fee waivers. Most schools offer these. I think you can. I think there is something about that on our admissions website, so you should be able to find that information. With our application, we also require transcripts. At this stage, unofficial transcripts are fine. I think official transcripts usually aren't required until after like the entire admissions process. And then with our application, we also require 3 letters of recommendation minimum. You are allowed to submit more if you'd like, but usually during admissions, we only read the first 3 letters unless there's one of the letters has something that indicates that we should read the others. For example, if there's like one of the letters is like not terribly informative, then maybe we'll pick out another one. Next slide, please. So there's a few other things that we require on the application. There are, so on the Grad Apply website, we also have spaces where you can list certain things such as research experiences. This can include like any talks or presentations you've given, as well as any papers that you've published. We also have an area where you can list any awards, honors, or fellowships and scholarships that you've received. And then finally, we have a section where you can list extracurriculars, teaching, service, and other like activities that you've done that are maybe not directly research related. Finally, perhaps the part of the application that you'll spend the most time on is going to be the statements. So we require a statement of objectives, which I'll go into more detail about on the next slide. And then at MIT, we also have an optional personal statement where you can elaborate on things that maybe you feel are not, you did not want to write about in your statement of objectives. Finally, this year, I believe MIT is not requiring the GRE as part of the graduate application. Many schools are moving away from the GRE requirements. So if you click on the link that Rahul just put in the chat, you should be able to see which schools do or don't require the GRE as part of their graduate application. Okay, next slide. Okay, so let me talk a little bit more about the statements, since that's probably the part where you're going to put in the most work on your application. So the statement of objectives is mainly what you want to put on the statement of objectives is basically why you want to go to graduate school. And then you also want to demonstrate like that why you are maybe a good fit for MIT's program and why MIT is a good fit for you. So for example, you might want to put something about like what your research interests are and like how you came to be interested in like certain areas of physics. We also want to see that you have the potential to be a good researcher. So for some people, they demonstrate this by writing about prior research experience, but that doesn't have to be the only way to show that you have the potential to do research. So, so for example, we also look for things like, are you engaged in your classes? Maybe are you engaged in other opportunities on campus, even if they're not research related, like teaching or other activities. And then a third factor we're looking for is resilience or grit is what some people call it. So are there examples where you've overcome like adversity in your life or in your academic career so far? All right, next slide. Okay, Rahul, I think this is you.
Yeah. So other things that we're looking for in the statements include sort of what you're able to bring to our department. So we look for evidence in the statements that you've strived to improve your communities, maybe done some stuff outside of classes and research. So a lot of our applicants have done things like SPS, which is an organization for US students called the Society of Physics Students. There's also folks who tutor, who volunteer in their communities and do outreach. And these are all great. We want to make sure that you are a positive influence in the community that you're a part of. And we want to make sure that you'll bring that positive influence with you when you start at MIT. And finally, this point can't be emphasized enough, but the statements are the place where you drive home the point that grad school is the right choice for you. So this means that, you know, whether you're applying to MIT or another school, you should make it clear that there's a particular reason you are applying to that school, and that school fits strongly within your overall career goals. And so additionally, the statement of purpose is where you sort of mention research you're interested in, professors you're interested in, et cetera. And that is also clear evidence that you've researched the school in depth and that you know what you're talking about. Next slide. So in addition to the statements, the statement of purpose and the personal statement, we also accept 3 or more rec letters. And so in the rec letters, we are looking for professors or other faculty level people, research scientists, et cetera, who know you well enough and who you've either closely interacted with in a research or a classroom context. So if you were in like a small class, which was a lot discussion based, or if it was just like a few of you in like a physics class, that's a good opportunity because they're able to see, you know, sort of like how you learn, how you interact with your peers, how good you are at sort of grasping new concepts, etc. And another key point is that these letters don't need to be from your home institution. So say that you might have done some significant research work at another university or college or national lab during a summer, or you might have sort of taken classes at another school. They don't need, these rec letters can be from anyone who's at a faculty or similar level. They don't need to be from your home institution. And what's more important is that they need to be able to write a strong letter for you. So are they able to speak to your capabilities and potential on research and leadership? And do they remember who you are, basically? A lot of the times when we're reading these rec letters, we look for specific anecdotes to sort of, just help us gauge what type of a person you are inside the lab and inside the classroom. And sometimes professors might say no if they feel like they don't know you well enough, or if they feel like they can't write a strong letter. They will say no, which occasionally happens, and that's totally fine. You can always go and ask someone else for another rec letter, someone who you feel might write a higher quality, stronger rec letter. Next slide. So now we've talked about sort of the logistics of what you need to do for the application, but then there's like a black box, right? When you hit submit on your application, you don't know what happens until you hear the decision. So this slide is designed to sort of demystify that process. So once you hit submit, starting on December 15th, which is the nominal application deadline, the admissions chair, Matt Evans, and the 3 student readers, that is me, Wenzer, and Mason, read through around 400 applications each over the following month. And then we finish this stage by early to mid-January. And after this, we submit our initial reviews, and then the applications are sent over to the individual research areas. So if you're interested in, say, astrophysics, your application would then be sent on to 2 or 3 astro faculty who would read that and sort of judge your fit for that particular division. The applications are also shopped around to PIs as well, because some PIs might be really impressed with a particular candidate and be like, I'm happy to take them on, I'm happy to fund them. And so in early February, the research areas come back with their top choices, and then the entire admissions committee, so that is the 4 of us, me, Mason, Wenzer, and Matt, along with all the faculty readers from each individual division, we all have a big meeting where we discuss all the applicants and the offers that we're going to make to them. And then we usually extend offers a week after this. So usually mid-ish, nearly late Feb, but not quite. And then after the offers are sent out, if you're accepted, that's great news. You have until April 15th to accept offers. And MIT tries to give everyone a decision when everyone else gets a decision. So that's usually like mid to late Feb. However, other schools tend to operate on a more rolling decision basis. So some students might hear back in like late Jan, and other schools might like only get back to you in like late March. And so the thing is that before this April 15th deadline, which applies to all United States grad schools, you might hear positive or negative news from any school at any time. I think that's it. And that last link, Mason, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I I actually forgot to populate the slide, one of the many things that I forgot to do. So early on, we talked about the FISCAT mentorship program, which again is the program that pairs current grad students with prospective applicants for more in-depth guidance about the application process. So I would, the link is open, but I will encourage you to wait until the end of the webinar to see if you would actually need more in-depth help regarding the applications, because I think that a lot of the questions will be answered during the rest of the webinar. And hand it
Thanks so
over back
much
to
for
Emily.
Sorry about that. Yeah, thanks so much for such a thorough presentation. So now let's introduce all of our panelists today who will be answering all of your questions. Just to reiterate, my name is Emily. I am a second-year AMO student. I work with Vladan Vuletic on basically neutral atoms and moving them around in arrays. So basically what that means is we are trying to create tools for studying like quantum information or condensed matter systems and things like that. It's just a very versatile kind of tool. So now let me ask Lisa to please introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here. I'm Lisa, as Emily said. I'm a fourth year astrophysics student. I work with Professor Scott Hughes on gravitational wave theory. So typically I look at binary black hole systems where one of the black holes is much larger than the other one. And so we can use general relativistic perturbation theory to study these systems theoretically. Yep.
Thanks, Lisa. Next, let's have Kyle introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle. I'm a second year in AMO, and I work in Professor Isaac Schwang's research group. We do experimental trapped ion quantum computing. So we trap individual atomic ions and use lasers and electric fields to control the internal state, and are trying to develop tools that could eventually be used for scalable quantum computing. There are also a lot of people in my group who do the theory side of quantum information and are in the sort of quantum information subfield. So I know, unfortunately, we don't have any bona fide QI people on this panel, but maybe I can help answer some of those questions if I'm familiar with that too.
Great, thanks, Kyle. Next, let's have Noah.
Hi, I'm Noah. I'm a first year graduate student here. I'm in the Nuclear and Particle Experiment Division. I work with Professor Phil Harris on collider-based searches for dark matter.
Thanks, Noah. Now, maybe Mason, you can say a little bit about your research.
Sure. So yeah, again, I'm fourth year astro student, and I do X-ray timing spectroscopy and also polarimetry of neutron stars with Professor Deepta Chakrabarty.
Thanks, Mason. Rahul?
Yeah, so I work on the TESS satellite, the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, with Dr. George Ricker. My primary interests are detection of explosive transients, so things like supernovas and tidal disruption events, but I also work on stellar astrophysics, specifically astroseismology and the dynamics of multiple star systems.
Thanks, Rahul. And finally, Windsor.
Hi, everyone, again. I'm Windsor. I work with Tracy Slatyer, and I'm mainly interested in cosmology and dark matter.
Thanks, Windsor. So just a quick reminder to everyone, if you can please submit your question in the Slido, and before submitting, could you please take a look at the existing questions? I see that we have a lot of questions, and hopefully we can address them all today, but since we are unlikely to do so, we were hoping to have people upvote on the questions that they would also like answered so we can address as many as possible. So let's get started. So the first question here is the following. In order to successfully get into the PhD program, is it advisable that the candidate first approaches the professor before getting accepted into the program? So that's a great question that I also had myself when I was applying for grad school. So if any of the panelists would like to comment on that, please raise your hand and I can call you. Windsor?
Yeah, I can just say, I think in my experience, contacting a professor that like you haven't been in touch with before, right before applying to schools, doesn't work so well. I remember I had like tested this out with just like one or two professors and I was applying to grad school, and the response I usually got was wait until admissions are done. I think the situation is a little different if you are like working with a professor, like doing a summer internship before you apply to grad school, then that situation is like a little bit different. But like I think cold emailing a professor like right before you apply to graduate school is not so common in physics.
Thanks, Spencer. Rahul?
I was muted, sorry. So I just want to say that I think like if you do email a professor, I think it's important to emphasize that you're not looking for like, I guess, like them to put in a good word for you, especially if you don't know them. So I actually emailed my PI, Dr. Ricker, before I applied, but I sort of framed my query as like, you know, what is it like to work on tests? Like, what is a day in the life? And so I think if you frame your request in that way, professors are definitely much more likely to respond positively. Um, and you can also use that specific information in your application. But I will add the caveat that you should not email a professor at every single institution you're applying to. Maybe pick like your top 2 or 3 if you would like, and then do that. But of course, it's absolutely not necessary, as Wenzer said, but it can help you sort of direct your application and make it more focused and specific.
Thanks, Rahul. Sydney?
I just wanted to add, because I received this question quite a bit from our email list, and it's clear to me that there are other schools in other countries that require applicants to find a sponsor as part of their application process, and that is absolutely not what we require. So if you're trying to learn more about a research area from something beyond what's on the website, I think that's helpful, but there is no requirement nor desire for you to have to figure out your funding or sponsorship as part of your application process. So if that's part of the question, I just want to disabuse that expectation.
Yeah, thanks, Sydney. I would also like to comment on this one myself. So I think this also depends on the school and the professor, because during the time when I applied, I noticed that at certain schools, perhaps if the professors were busier, they would just say, okay, please, you know, we can talk after after admissions decisions have gone out. But then at other universities, I had some pretty engaging conversations with professors as well. So I think in terms of getting to know more about what the professor is doing and the professor's research interests, I think it's a great opportunity. But in terms of getting accepted into the program, I would say those are not very related. All right, so let's move on to the next question. So do professors frown on seeing emails from students about joining their groups? Should I email them for a potential research discussion during application? So I guess this is quite similar to the one that we just answered, but if anyone has anything they would like to add, if not, we can just move on to the next one. Lisa?
Yeah, I'll just quickly add, I really think you should emphasize quality over quantity when it comes to emails. Like, it's really not a good idea to sort of have a form email that you copy and paste and send to a large number of professors. If you are going to email someone, you should focus on having that email being very specific to the research, showing that you're interested and engaged with the particular research area that they're focused on. And as people have said, you don't have to do this, but if you are going to do it, make sure that, you know, the email is very appropriate for the professor that you're emailing and not just copied and pasted.
That's a great point, Lisa. All right, so let's move on to the next question then. So out of 10 random physics PhD students, how many of them are depressed and or overworked? And how many of them drop out or get kicked out of the program? So obviously on our panel, we don't have 10 random physics PhD students. So of course we can't speak for the whole department. And in terms of getting statistics on how many of them drop out and get kicked out, I'm wondering if I can defer to Sydney about that. Sydney, do you know about this?
So let me be clear about one aspect of this. There are many programs, including at MIT, where more people are admitted and then there's a weeding out process with an expectation that a subset of them will go on to continue to complete the PhD. And that is absolutely not our model in this department. When we extend an offer of admission to a talented applicant, we expect that they have several possible paths to success in the department. And we expect they will work very hard, but we expect that any student that comes to our program will be able to complete the program. So there's not a weeding out aspect. However, there are certainly students who decide that this is not the path that they want and that they may want to use a master's degree credential and they may downshift and complete a master's degree, which is not, we do not screen external applicants for a master's program, but there is a path for people to be able to leave here with a graduate degree and take their credential to a different path for their careers. Our goal is that everyone will successfully complete the program or leave of their own volition. It's pretty unusual. I can't think of anyone having been kicked out of the program, and I've worked here for 4.5 years. It's not really how we think about it. But there certainly are circumstances in which people decide that a different path is preferable for them.
Thank you, Sydney. Mason?
Yeah, so I just wanted to add some numbers to this. So I'm not particularly sure of the exact numbers in physics, but there is a group at MIT called the Grad Students for Healthy MIT who is really advocating for improvements in mental health services for grad students, and they conducted a survey, and I'll just share a few numbers that are, I believe they're publicly available, but I've definitely seen these around MIT, and I was actually taking a kind of screenshot of a poster before I came here. So it was something like 1 in 3 MIT grad students have felt so depressed that it's difficult to function. Over 90% of MIT grad students feel quite overwhelmed, and a lot of the reported stresses include stuff like cost of living and health concerns and advisor relationships. But one thing I will say is that there are improvements to the process, and I would like Rahul to expound on that.
Yeah, so those stats might sound alarming, but the thing is that there are so many resources available at MIT for people who feel sort of, like they're having mental health issues or they're having issues with their advisor or something like that. So I know, so recently, actually, the Grad Students for Healthy MIT, we just, there was a campaign a couple of years ago to actually increase the number of covered mental health sessions in our grad student health insurance from 12 per year to 52 per year. So that means you can get a free therapy session every week, and after that, the copay is only $5. There's also other offices at MIT that will help you with problems like advising or things like that. There's the Ombuds office, there's the Office of Graduate Education. There are resources for basically every issue that you could face at MIT. And so we know, as Mason said earlier, right? Like, we're not going to tell you that grad school is like sunshine and rainbows like all the time, because, well, it's not. It can be frustrating, overwhelming at times. But the important thing to emphasize is that, like, if you come to MIT, there are resources both within the department and outside that will help you get through this. And I think that's true of any school as well, right? Like, doing a PhD is hard. It's like 6 years of like grueling like classes and research and everything. And like there's bound to be rough patches here and there. And I think what's most important is if we focus on the resources available, and if you're able to, get the help and support that you need to make sure that you make it successfully through the program.
Thanks, Rahul. Yeah, it's really great to hear that there are so many resources for students, especially since we all know that healthcare in the United States is not cheap. All right, moving on to the next question. Does participation in summer schools and workshops play a role in the assessment of a PhD candidate? So personally, I have attended a summer school, but I'm not sure if this actually plays a role. Mason, would you like to add?
Yeah, I'll just emphasize one thing about the way that we read applications. And it's that we read applications in a holistic sense. So when we read applications, it's not a zero-sum game where we say, oh, this person didn't do this thing, therefore this application will no longer be read further by anyone else in the department. So, any aspect of you that you want to emphasize, whether you have attended summer schools, any workshops you may have participated in, which would definitely show your eagerness in a topic, but it's not the only way to show your interest in either the topic or MIT's program. So your research experiences, how enthusiastic you were in class, and how your letter writers would convey that in their letters as well. All of that would come together as a package for how you present yourself into the department. But to directly answer the question, yes, it does play a role. Participation in summer schools and workshops do play a role, but it's also not the end all, be all, end all in how we evaluate applicants.
Thanks, Mason. So if no one has anything else to add for that one, let's move on. So is there a ranking of the research areas where MIT accepts more graduate students? Say MIT accepts more students interested in astro than in biophysics. Mason?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's a ranking per se. I think it's more just reflective of the number of faculty and the number of students at any one year. So a larger division, so I guess in this case, the astrophysics division is larger than the biophysics division. So you do see more students accepting the astro than bio, just because of the numbers. And also, any one division might might feel like they have capacity and might not admit as many students for any given year for any given, for a variety of reasons. So I hope that answered the question. Anyone else want to add something? Feel free to.
Sydney, did you have something to say?
Just to add that there also may be way more applications for astrophysics, so it's really not that kind of a numbers game. I think I just want to pause here and actually wave the flag for, if there's an area that is of great interest to an applicant, they are likely to write a statement that shows a lot of passion, and passion is something we like a lot for people to demonstrate what excites them. So I think that might be the better approach to the question.
Thanks for the comment, Sydney. So I guess one thing that I would also like to add to that is each professor at any point in time may have a certain number of spots for incoming students. So at any point in time, maybe a professor just doesn't have any spots available for incoming students, whether that depends on funding or if they have enough students and can't take on any more. So I do believe that that has an effect on how many students get accepted to each division every year. All right. So the next question is, I want to work with a specific professor or group of professors. If I get accepted, does that mean I get to work with these professors? So this is kind of along the lines of what I was just commenting on. So this is not necessarily the case. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. So that may be funding or the number of students that the professor currently has, and may not be able to take on more. In terms of working with the professor within the division that the student applied, I guess I'm not really sure about that one. Maybe someone from AdCom has something to say about that. Windsor?
Yeah, I wanted to say that similar to how you answered this question, whether or not you get to work with the professors that you listed on your application depends on like your funding and just that professor's availability. So for example, if you got accepted on like that professor's research group's funding, that's usually a pretty clear indication that like, yeah, this professor wants to take you on, you will work with this professor. If you're accepted instead on like a fellowship that's not tied to any specific group, you have more flexibility in choosing an advisor. And in that case, you'll want to talk to the professors that you're interested in to make sure that they have, you know, the time, just like the mental capacity to take on another student. Yeah.
Thanks, Spencer. Noah?
Yeah, so just to add to that, I think as far as I've been aware, within the division, if you're admitted to a specific division, you should be pretty set in terms of finding someone for that. And it usually, at least in NUPACs, I've been informed it's almost always the first choice. And that there was maybe one case in the past 5 years where someone didn't get their first choice of research advisor. But you definitely do want to talk to people once you're admitted at the open house to see if they have open spots available. And I think that's very important in terms of making your graduate school decision. I know that was one of the priorities I made sure to cover when I met with professors. So yeah, it's very important once you're admitted to discuss that with any potential research advisors.
Thanks, Noah. Kyle?
Yeah, so I was just going to say something fairly similar about talking with professors at the open house, but maybe also share that in AMO, at least, it was sort of my impression that at least for a few groups, there was a little bit more of a restriction on how many students a professor could take in that particular year. And so it was really important to talk to professors and at the open house and see about that. But I also just wanted to add that there are plenty of people who come in, there are at least a few people who come in and don't really know who they're going to work with, or maybe you initially want to work with a particular professor and then it doesn't work out, you end up switching or whatever, and that happens perfectly often too. And I think the department has some resources to support students. There's guaranteed funding if you decide to switch advisors and things like that. And maybe Sydney can add to that or has something else to say, but yeah, just wanted to put that in there too.
Thank you, Kyle. Actually, I did want to say something about that. We don't expect students to declare who their supervisor, their long-term supervisor will be until at the end of their first year. Oftentimes people come in and they know who that's going to be and they start working with them from the beginning. There are, in our department, we have transitional funds through teaching assistantships for one term if someone is switching, something about what they're already doing isn't working as a good fit for them. And this actually goes back to some of the pressures that many grad students around MIT are under. We at least have the luxury of those additional funds to make that aspect of pressure a little easier to manage. And I just have a word of caution. If you name a specific person in your application and you say that that's the only person you want to work with, you should really, 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 really mean that. Because if that person is not available to take on new students, that could impact your application. Instead, I would recommend naming a person and saying why you're interested in working with that individual, because there may be other people in that same group who are actively looking for talented students and in a position to hire people.
Thanks, Sydney. Kyle?
Yeah, sorry, that just reminded me, when I applied, in particular, I think I named a couple of professors in the department, but my current advisor is not one of them. So, and then I came to the open house and talked to him and learned about the stuff he was doing, and then sort of totally changed my mind about, who I was thinking about working with. And so that's definitely a possibility as well. So don't, as Sydney was saying, don't, sort of intentionally narrow yourself in, but also if you change your mind later, that's cool too.
Thanks, Kyle. I also wanted to just emphasize the point that not only is it possible to switch professors within your division, it's also possible to switch between divisions if you feel like it's not the right fit for you. And so we also have these transitional fundings that Sydney has mentioned that will support students if they decide ultimately to do so. And then I also wanted to add to Kyle's point in AMO, at least in my experience with the open houses and things like that, it does seem to depend on which division you're applying to. So for example, for theorists, I kind of got the impression that after students had accepted their offer, they were maybe still not really sure and still considering between different professors. And in my experience in experimental AMO, at least, during the open house, I got the impression that students were deciding on the school depending on the professor that they wanted to work for. So in that case, you would have to be a little bit more careful in making sure that that professor has an open spot for you. So this does depend very highly on the division that you're applying for. All right, so moving on, as being a student from a research lacking country, is it really possible to be in the PhD class at MIT? So I'm assuming the result is between 3.7 and 3.8. I'm assuming that means the GPA. So what can be done in that case to compete? So I would say, just for myself, the research opportunities that I personally have pursued have not been in my home country. So that's, yeah, just something that I quickly wanted to put out there. Windsor?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think I talked about this a little bit at the presentation in the beginning. So it's true that like oftentimes on admissions, like the easiest way to look for people who have the potential to be good researchers are to admit people who are already good researchers. But I think more and more now people are recognizing that doing admissions in this, if we do admissions in this way, we miss out on like a huge pool of talent from students who like don't have as many of these opportunities to pursue research. And so a couple other ways that you can show your, you can demonstrate your potential to do good research is like showing that you're engaged with your classes, you know, like do you interact, like how much do you interact with the professors? Do you pursue other physics related opportunities at your school? I don't know, outreach, teaching, these kinds of things. So definitely research is not the only way to have a competitive application.
Thanks, Windsor. Rahul?
Yeah, I also just wanted to add that like we evaluate applicants in the context that they're coming from. So I think someone mentioned earlier that it's not a zero-sum game, like one person has research, the other person doesn't. Like that means that the non-research person gets automatically eliminated. That's not the case. We do look at like individual students' backgrounds. So, you know, like, oh, where did they go to school? Did they go to school in a country where there's not that many physics research opportunities? You know, or is their school like, I guess, more of like a teaching school rather than like a research university or things like that? And so there are really ways, like, I guess, for you to show that you would make a good researcher without doing like formal research. Like I know at least in a lot of applications I read last year, a lot of students did directed reading projects and like wrote up like a brief literature review and stuff, and with like professors at their home institutions. And I think that's a great way to, you know, get some research experience without like, especially if you're not able to do so in your home country, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Rahul. One thing I'd also like to add is that don't be shy to reach out to professors in other countries. If a professor has some funding available for you, then they can support you to go to that country and take up research in their group. So yeah, just don't be shy to, you know, reach out to professors that are not at your home country or at your home institution. Lisa?
Just following on from what Emily said, particularly in this day and age, I think it's more and more common to also do research remotely. So you might not even need to actually physically travel to a different country if you want to do research with a professor in a different country.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point. Thanks, Lisa. All right, so next question. how many PhD students does MIT Physics typically admit each year? And are there quotas on domestic versus international students? So for this person, I have no idea. Mason?
Let me first just say that I know that Rahul and Wednesday have to go to another meeting. So thanks you two for coming along and answering the questions. Again, I'm also from the admissions committee, so I will still be on the line to answer the rest of the questions. So thanks again to Rahul and Wednesday for staying here. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
So I guess regarding the questions, so we typically admit anywhere between 40 to 50 students on average. I think last year was a very unusual. Oh, I seen Sydney was, let me get her to answer this first.
I just wanted to make the distinction between offers of admission versus incoming class.
Right.
So if you wanted to clarify.
Yeah, so sorry, I guess I'll leave that to you for more comprehensive answer.
Oh, okay. I mean, I'll say that we make approximately 100 offers of admission each year, expecting usually that around 50% will decide to come here. So usually our incoming class is around 45. The current incoming class is quite a bit larger. It's 65 incoming students. We had a higher portion of people accept their offers, which is very exciting for us. But it's a very big incoming class, and the norm would be more like 45 to 50, 40, you know, as Mason was saying. I didn't mean to jump on you, Mason, I'm sorry. I just wanted to, because I think the question was really about offers that we make, as well as how many people are coming here. And while I have the floor, I just want to make one comment, which is that many people are submitting questions we may not get to. We will try really hard to follow up individually with questions that people have. And if we fail to follow up within the next few days, which is entirely possible, I just want to remind you about the physics-grad@mit.edu email address, which goes to me, but which I can also share with a subset of talented current grad students to respond to you, because it is our goal to answer all your questions. We definitely won't get to all of them today.
Thanks, Sydney. I'm wondering, Mason, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh yeah, sure. I guess the thing I'll add regarding the quota, so the second part of the question. So, we don't have, say any formal quotas on domestic or international students, but what we are limited by, as everyone else was saying before, the number of students that a professor will be able to take on, and also the division as well as the amount of funding that's available.
Thanks, Mason. All right, so moving on to the next question. If I want to research in astrophysics, but I don't have any prior research experience in that field, but in others like material science, do I have a chance? Mason?
Okay, I really want to answer this question. It's one of my, I guess, a question that I get asked a lot by many undergrads, and it's also one of my favorite questions to answer. So I would say, when you're an undergrad, you are not necessarily expected to really be, be honed in on exactly what you want to do either for the rest of your life or even for the rest of your PhD, because the point of undergrad is to really explore all of the different physics fields and try out different things. And then you may very well change your mind at the end of undergrad, in the mid, when you're studying grad school, as Kyle was mentioning when he was talking about switching advisors, between applying and between coming here. And also you can also kind of change in the middle of grad school, and that's not an issue at all. But I guess the direct question here is, changing between different fields. And what I'll say is that in whatever research project you're doing in your undergrad, or in whatever classes you're taking in your undergrad, you'll learn a variety of skills. You'll learn programming, communication skills, technical skills, and all of that will contribute to how exactly you learn in the future. So, it doesn't matter exactly what you do. If you can show that you are focused in whatever you're doing, that you are able to communicate clearly the lessons you've learned, and able to pick up a couple of transferable skills. Programming, definitely one of the big ones, but also experimental skills, of course. And if you're able to highlight that in all your statements, and if your letter writers can speak to your competency in a lot of those areas, you will definitely have a chance in that sense. No prior research experience in any particular field is not a big problem at all. But you do want to show why you really want to pursue that field, especially if you have no experience. I think yeah, that's it. You just need to sell yourself well.
Thanks, Mason. I'd also just like to add quickly to this. So for me personally, each summer I worked in like an entirely different field. So I was pretty worried, how am I supposed to compete with another applicant who joined someone's lab in their first year of undergrad and stayed in that lab throughout like all of undergrad. I don't know how I was supposed to compete with that. But as Mason was saying, you pick up a lot of transferable skills between all of your different experiences, whether it's experiment or theory. It doesn't really seem to matter too much if you don't have that much experience in the specific field that you're applying to. Noah?
So as someone who kind of did the whole first year, started undergrad with one advisor and then continued through my senior year, and I'm still coordinating with him on projects now, I really do think it's actually beneficial to have a variety of research experiences because it helps you determine what you like and what you don't like. I consider myself very lucky that one of the first research projects I got engaged with is something that I actually am really passionate about and really do like, but I understand a lot of people aren't necessarily that lucky. And it's important to explore and make sure that you're choosing the right field that suits you the best. So I would in fact argue that having research experience, and to connect this to one of the more recent questions that just popped up, having research experience in a few fields can actually be a benefit because it really shows that you know what you want to do and that the field you're actually going for and you're picking is something that you definitely enjoy more than other options.
Thanks, Noah. All right, so the next question is, I did my BA and Masters of Science in the UK, but I'm originally from a non-English speaking country where I attended high school. Do I need to sit the IELTS or the TOEFL? So for that one, maybe I can defer to Sydney on that.
So the question is about the TOEFL waiver. Is that what the question is? I think.
Yeah, I think depending on how many years of school that you've done. Yeah.
I mean, there's an FAQ on this that's pretty thorough, but the short version is that if you have studied for 3 or more years for a degree in a school where English is the language of instruction, so not necessarily the country, but certainly the school at least, you would not have to provide an IELTS or TOEFL result. There's a place on the application actually where you get to put what the language of instruction was at different stages of your schooling, which will address this. So I think that it's probably the case that this person will not need an IELTS or TOEFL, or people in this category would not need it. It's sort of a self-decision. If you feel you're on the edge, maybe you've only had 2 years, I would highly recommend taking the IELTS or TOEFL, but if it's 3 or more, I think you should be fine.
Great, thank you, Sydney. So the next question is, what are the admission committee's views on schools with grade deflation policies where a 3.5 GPA would put you at the top 5 to 10% of your class? Yeah, it's a great question. Mason?
I wonder if Sydney has more to add on this aspect, because I don't really think about grade deflation or grade inflation all too often. But I will emphasize again the holistic nature at which we look at applications. So we do look at the context of where those grades lie, but again, that is not the only thing that we look at. We look at your research experiences, your statements, your letters, etc.
Sydney, I'm wondering if you have something to add.
I mean, we don't have grade cutoffs as part of the application, so I'm not quite certain I understand the question. I think that there's a pretty thorough description about how to complete information about the most relevant classes that you've taken, because that's the other aspect of this. It's not purely just your GPA. It depends on, you know, how you did in the classes that would be most relevant for your work here. And they're not only physics classes, they're classes in a variety of areas that you sort of self-identify in your application. So I don't know. I think there's a place on the application where you can talk about what the grading parameters are in your school, and quite a bit of information is collected on that. I think I'm answering the question. Yeah, I welcome anybody else to jump in if I'm not.
Yeah, I have absolutely no idea about this one. Jason, if you have anything more to add about how this is handled, you know. Okay, moving on. So is it possible to see a PhD in mission statistics for MIT astrophysics somewhere, and who is the perfect candidate? So in terms of the perfect candidate, I think this was mentioned earlier, the application is viewed and taken into consideration holistically. So, you know, everyone's time is still limited in terms of what they can do. So whether that's research experience or taking on extracurricular activities and leadership opportunities or part-time jobs and all of these things, they're all taken into consideration. So I would maybe argue that there is no perfect candidate, especially since the incoming pools of students all have different backgrounds and different experiences. So in terms of who's the perfect candidate, that's not a very easy question to answer. But in terms of the admission statistics, I'm wondering if we have those. Yeah, Mason?
Yeah, so I don't think we have, well, you know, the admission statistics for specific divisions, I don't think they are public, but what I can share is these public statistics that are by the institutional research, I guess like a group at MIT that conduct surveys. And one of the surveys / databases that they keep track of are the number of students that are enrolled in any graduate programs throughout MIT, including retention statistics, attrition statistics, and also I think this is new, but also where exactly they end up post PhD. So you can have a fun field day looking through these statistics, as I've done when I was procrastinating. So please feel free to take a look at these statistics for more information. But I don't think we can give a breakdown, you know, beyond different departments. You know, we can't break them into like quantum information or AMO or Astro.
Thanks, Mason. All right, so moving on to the next question. What funding does a graduate student receive? So maybe I can just start off on that. So for your first year of graduate school, there are 3 types of funding. There is fellowship funding, whether that's internal from the MIT Department of Physics, or external. So these are like, for example, NSF fellowships, things like that you have applied for yourself. The second type is an RA, which stands for research assistantship. So this one is paid for by the professor that you are working with. So this is the most standard type of funding that you will get for the duration of your PhD. Unless someone can correct me on that one. And so the final type is teaching assistantship, so that's TA. So that type of funding just comes from basically being a TA for the class and grading and stuff like that. So in terms of the sort of breakdown of the number of students for getting each type of funding, I'm not sure if we have any information on that, or maybe Sydney can add to that. But in terms of funding, your first year, I believe, is there is this funding source that is guaranteed for you. And then so you have your entire first year to kind of decide who you would most likely want to work for by the end of your first year. Sydney?
I'll just add that the funding package at the physics department, we're very fortunate that every single one of our students is fully funded. And what fully funded means here in our language is that funding covers all of the graduate tuition, student extended health insurance for the student, not for family members if they have other family members here with them. And it provides a living stipend, which is paid twice a month, which I would describe as being sufficient for a pretty reasonable graduate student lifestyle. But nobody's getting rich on saving money from this stipend, but also nobody should be taking out additional loans. For those of you who are from the US and have undergrad loans from your undergrad studies, you should not be adding to those. I definitely defer to students to describe whether I'm accurate on this about whether the stipend is sufficient for their lifestyle, but it seems that it is over time. And the other thing I would say is that our students are paid 12 months a year with their living stipend because students are expected to continue their research work or teaching preparation if they're TAs in the fall term over the summer. If they make other arrangements, do an internship or something like that that's paid or other, but that's a pretty small number of people who would do that. Yes, the funding, if we make you an offer, is definitely guaranteed for the first year, whether it's from internal or external fellowships or research assistantship. No, the teaching assistantship is pretty unusual in the first year, but that's a possibility as well. And provided a student is making what we describe as satisfactory progress, that funding is expected to be provided throughout the time, the duration of the student's studies here in the physics department. And the subtext here is sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes fewer years. Satisfactory progress means that you're hitting the benchmarks of finding a research supervisor. If you need that extra term to figure that out, we do have that transitional teaching assistantship, but it doesn't mean you don't have to do anything and we're going to pay you for 5 years to not make any progress. I mean, obviously you want to make progress, you want to get your degree, but we almost never have people who aren't making progress. We might have people who are talking to us because they need more time to sort of figure something out, or they've made a change and so they need a little bit longer, but we're very fortunate that we have a lot of funding in this department. And a not insignificant amount of that is actually provided as teaching assistantships for students in later years in their studies. To anticipate another question that may pop up from that, we do not require that everyone serve as a teaching assistant. I know that some programs do require that. We recommend that. We think teaching experience is a wonderful thing. And some areas of research, for instance, theoretical areas may have less research funding available than experimental areas. And so those students may do more teaching assistantships than others. I just covered a whole lot of stuff. So if there are more questions, please jump in. Other students want to fill in anything?
Lisa?
I'll just say some professors really strongly encourage that you teach at some stage during your degree. Others are less pushy about that sort of thing. So it can depend on your advisor as well.
Thanks, Lisa. Mason?
One thing I'll add, because I just saw the latest question, the funding between international students and domestic students are exactly the same. There's no difference. That's all.
Great. Yeah, I also just wanted to reiterate the point of the department having transitional funding. So if at any point you're, unhappy and you feel like the fit is not good and you want to switch to a different professor, then the department has TA opportunities available so that you will continue to be supported financially as you're transitioning to either looking for a different professor and things like that. So yeah, that's really great. All right, so the next question, does GPA matter? My GPA is really low. So I would say that GPA does matter. but also just to reiterate the point that the applications are viewed holistically. So yeah, we understand that there are situations where if the applicant had some challenging things going on, there are also places in the application for you to write about those and to explain what exactly was going on, or in terms of, for example, the grade deflation policies that we addressed earlier. So there's definitely opportunities for you to make that explicit in your application. So if anyone else has anything to add to that one, Lisa?
So just to follow on from what Emily said, probably the key place to do that, if you want to sort of provide context for your application, is the optional personal statement. That's sort of designed exactly for that purpose. So that's something you can definitely discuss there. Yeah.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, if there's nothing more about that one. So the next question, I believe we have mostly answered. So should we already have a supervisor from MIT in a research topic prior to application? So no. Right, so we've already discussed basically the maybe there's some subtleties between different fields, and maybe in terms of what is sort of typical for students, but during the application process, you definitely don't need to have a supervisor and a research topic prior to the application process. If you are admitted and you attend the open house, then you'll have more chances to meet with the professors, discuss with them what research opportunities are available. But even after getting accepted, and if you choose to attend MIT, at that point, you also still don't need to have a research topic. I think there's also, it's also pretty common that students also change their research directions in the middle of their PhD, even if they're working with the same professor. So that's also something that happens pretty often as well. If no one else has anything to add to that. All right. So next question, what are the keys to a successful student advisor relationship at MIT? Nathan?
So I think the best answer to this is communication, because advisors have different styles of working, you have different styles of working. So it's really just communicating for advisor as to how exactly you would like to work with them. You know, do you prefer a hands-on advisor that checks on with you every day, or do you prefer someone a bit more hands-off and would like to check in with you, weekly or even every 2 weeks? And then there are some professors that are really into giving like a yearly kind of review, if I can put it that way. And my advisor is pretty hands-off. we never really do like a review type thing, or we just meet once a week. And I like that arrangement, but it may not be for some people. Some people might think that that's too hands-off, and I'm fine with that. So again, communication is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle?
Yeah, some pretty similar to Mason, but I wanted to add, like, at the open house, I highly recommend very specifically asking your potential advisors about their advising style ahead of time, and talk to their students and ask their students about how they view their advisor's advising style, because sometimes those two things don't always entirely match up. But that's what the open house is for, and so there's plenty of opportunities to learn about that. If it's if you're actively looking for that information, you can definitely find that during the open house.
Yeah, absolutely. I also personally wanted to emphasize that you should definitely talk to the grad students in the department, both the ones that are working with the professor that you're interested in and other grad students. So personally, I've also reached out to alumni of the group, so people who have completed their PhD, also people who have switched groups. You'll get a variety of information, of course, but I think that often applicants are very focused on talking with the professors, which of course is very important, but I think that also talking with the grad students is often overlooked, because especially with professors who are more hands-off or who don't really have time to meet with their students or to come to lab and things like that, most of your interactions will likely be with the other grad students in the group. So that will dictate your day-to-day research life, and how you get along with those people is also very important. So if no one else has anything to add for this question. So the next question is, do you have any advice on getting accepted to a research internship, especially if the student is a foreigner like me, apart from email to hundreds of people? So I think Lisa mentioned earlier, it's maybe not advisable to send out a mass email to all of the professors at a given institution or a given country. I would say that professors appreciate if you put a little sort of personalized statement in your email saying, you know, I'm interested in particular in such and such paper that you've published, or such and such research direction. I think it goes to show that you've put some effort into trying to engage with the professor, as opposed to simply sending out a mass email saying, I'm interested in a research internship. Do you have any availability? So I also completely agree with Lisa on that. And I think also previously I mentioned, don't be shy to email professors in other countries, because there's lots of opportunities, and cold emailing definitely does work. Does anyone else have anything to add to that? No? All right. So the next question is admission more difficult for students with a master's degree in physics? Lisa?
I would say no. I personally received a master's degree before applying to the PhD here. I don't think it's a disadvantage at all. I think it's usually as part of a master's degree, you do some, you know, formal research component. That's not true of all master's degrees. Some are more coursework based, some last 2 years, some last 1 year. So it sort of depends, but usually students who have master's degrees have more opportunity to demonstrate sort of research abilities. It certainly is not a disadvantage, I would say, but maybe someone who knows more about the graduate admissions process can add to that.
I think here, I would also like to point out that in Europe, it's required to have a master's prior to getting a PhD. So especially if you're applying from Europe or other countries where it's either expected or required of you to get a master's degree before applying to PhD, I would say it's definitely not a disadvantage to do that, even if you're applying for PhD programs in the United States. So yeah, that's just kind of like a difference between the education systems. Lisa?
Yeah, just to add to exactly that point, Emily, in other places like Australia, the undergraduate degrees are 3 years as opposed to the 4-year undergraduate degrees in the States. So, you know, it's sort of more expected that you might do an honors degree or a master's degree after your undergraduate degree in places like Australia, where I'm from. So this is totally normal, and I don't think it's a disadvantage, as Emily said.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, moving on. So regarding admissions process, how much weight does MIT actually put on one's pure interest or passion for the subject compared to the GPA, your degree, honors, and publications? I think I would like to defer to Mason on this one.
Yeah, sure. So this, there are many ways you can answer this question, but one thing is that no two applicants are exactly the same. So it's very hard to put down a checklist of exactly what we're looking for. But I think again going back to this answer about holistic review, and to try to go into that a bit more detail and just saying the word holistic review like 10 times. So when we look over your statement of objectives, you undoubtedly write something about how you're very passionate about the field that you want to go into. And then after that, we kind of look at how you can kind of deliver on that. That includes things like what are your demonstrable, I guess, achievements or outputs in your schools, that can range from paper, not exclusively limited to, but can include things like papers, how you've done your class projects. And then we look at how the professors who you worked with evaluated you. And then, look at the what you have degrees, GPAs, that the whole package. So I can't again give a checklist of exactly what we tick off, exactly what we're looking for, but as long as you have that passion / interest backed up by I guess I do not want to kind of put down a checklist for fear of being too concrete about this. But things, again, just looking through your statements, what you've done in your previous research opportunities or even in classes, that's what we look for.
Thanks, Mason. Kyle?
I just want to throw in something that's probably obvious, but I don't think we've said it yet. And so I just want to make sure it's said, is that nobody should be applying to just MIT for a PhD in physics, right? Like if you're passionate about physics and you want to do a PhD, which is kind of, one of the requirements for coming here, you should also apply to lots of other places. And I have not asked anyone on this call, but I can tell you right away that they all also applied to lots of other schools as well. So just wanted to throw that out there too.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point that we should definitely should emphasize. All right, so if no one has anything else to add on that one. So next question, does the committee look at a different field professional experience / break from academia negatively for admission into PhD? So personally, I know other grad students in the department who've taken breaks off to work, and then they've discovered that, okay, they actually really love school and they want to come back to school. And I think that does help in the sense that that you've tried it out and you want to come back. So at least from my own perspective, I would say that it's not a disadvantage. And there are also a lot of students who have to perform military service as a requirement for their home country and a lot of things like that. So that's definitely something that the department keeps in mind when looking at applications. Mason?
Yeah, and I will just add that, what is more striking or what's definitely noticeable is if a gap in, whatever you have between education levels, if that is unexplained, that would be something that we would notice and we will be kind of wondering why that's not addressed.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. Anyone have anything else they would like to add to that? All right, so moving on, the next question is, should I contact the specific professor that I'm interested in working with prior to submitting my application to MIT? So I do think that we have addressed this question. I think that if you're interested in learning more about the research, that could be beneficial. But otherwise, it's definitely not a requirement for the application itself. So moving on, does a low GPA automatically receive a rejection from the admissions committee, and do research experience and circumstances outweigh a low GPA? So here I would also like to emphasize that there is no GPA cutoff for the application process, which I think is a fairly strong statement in the sense that the department does look at applications holistically. So I think that's, yeah, definitely a very important point to emphasize. But if anyone has anything else to add to that, I think we seem to be getting, yeah, Mason.
Yeah, I'll also just say, so particularly the second question about whether research experience and circumstances outweigh a low GPA. So what I'll say is that it can, but I can't say that it will outweigh.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so moving on to the next question. Is a publication record required? Does a submitted article but undergoing the review process count as a publication? So I also just want to point out, when I applied for grad school, I had 0 publications, and I am here, obviously. So definitely don't assume that you have to have a publication prior to applying for the PhD program. So does anyone have anything to add to that? Lisa?
If you can, and I know it's not always possible, but if you have a submitted article and you're able to post it on the archive or something like this, I think that's definitely something to do, because you're able to like actually provide a link to, you know, this original research that you've done. And that is, you know, that is a very great thing to have in your application, but I know it's not always possible. And definitely just having submitted like a journal article to a publication is great, and that's definitely something you should put in your application. Yeah,
Absolutely. Noah?
Just going off that, I believe there was a space for submitted for publications that were submitted but not necessarily yet published in the application. But that may have changed. I'm not sure if the formatting changes here, but I know I was able to provide information last year.
Nice, thank you. All right, so moving on to the next question. For subfields that have limited funding, for example, high energy theoretical physics, is it harder to get a PhD position? And also, does one have to worry about funding past 5 years in them? So personally, I'm not really sure where this 5 years comes from, because so I think the average PhD duration at MIT is something like 5.8 years. And there's nothing that changes after the 5-year mark. Your funding will likely just you know, come from your RA or your professor. So that's pretty standard, I would say. But in terms of subfields having limited funding, yeah, Sydney can comment.
I just want to reiterate that it may be the case that students in fields such as this would be getting more terms of their funding from teaching assistantships, but it doesn't mean that there's not funding for them.
Thank you, Sydney. Noah?
I just wanted to add, the 5 years is kind of a common figure from what I've seen in the US in terms of when funding guarantees run out. And notably, I believe Sydney can confirm this, but we don't have an explicit 5-year limit here on the guaranteed funding.
Yeah,
I confirm.
Yeah. Thanks, Sydney. All right, so next question. Can we submit the IELTS or TOEFL scorecard after the submission deadline? So Sydney?
I just want to be careful how to answer this, because if you do not have another way to demonstrate your English proficiency, you should take the IELTS or TOEFL and have a result that you can self-report on your application. However, you do not need to provide an official record of that result. It's self-reported at the period of when you're applying. If admitted, we would require you to send an official report as qualification to your application or to your acceptance.
Thanks, Sydney. Right, so next question. Some applicants seem to get in without ever having an interview. What decides whether an applicant is interviewed or not? So I believe that each university does this slightly differently as well. So that's also something to keep in mind. Mason, can you comment?
And to add on that, the different divisions here also decide on whether they want to do interviews or not. So astrophysics does do interviews, although I'm not exactly sure how they decide whether, how exactly an applicant's interviewed or not. There's a level of interest and, how and whether the committee wants to find out more about an applicant once they've developed a shortlist. But I'm not sure about more of the details on that. So either, Noah or Sydney.
Everyone I've talked to in NUPACs that was admitted this year did interview, but I have not talked to everybody explicitly and asked this question. So I can't guarantee that, but from what I've heard, everyone in NUPACs was interviewed. So I would say it's probably best to assume it's a division specific thing, like Mason said.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add to that is that an interview is not formally required as part of our application process, but increasingly over time, we're finding that more and more research groups add an interview as part of their sort of final selection. I think some of that is about making sure that there's a good fit with the applicant and a path for them to find supervision in the area. So I think it's sort of like a mutual interview, if you want to think about it that way. But it's not an indicator of anything beyond the local division's decision.
Just to add to that, it's not like, well, in my experience, it wasn't like a technical interview. It was more of a judge of like, well, kind of a personality fit for the division.
Lisa?
I'll say that it's the same for astrophysics. I think Mason can agree that it's not a particularly technical interview. And it's fairly nice experience, I would say, at least for me.
Yeah, it's nice to hear it's not stressful. All right, moving on. Will I have a chance to be admitted if I submit my first research paper only in winter? Yes, you do have a chance because I didn't have any papers when I applied and I still got into most of the schools that I applied to. So yes, you do have a chance. Kyle?
I just wanted to throw out also that like a lot of people have this really big focus on papers, but there's lots of other things, and we've said this already, but there's lots of other things that admissions committees look at trying to judge your fit for the department. And one that I just wanted to mention as well, I'm not on the admissions committee here, so I don't know exactly how they consider things, but at least at my undergrad, where I knew some people who were on the admissions committee, things like going to a conference and things like that were like weighted just as heavily as research papers. So there's plenty of other ways to show that you're a good fit for the department.
Thanks, Kyle. Sydney?
Just two quick additions. I think it probably depends on the area of research or interest that you're in, how emphasized that may or may not be. And there are different publications and, different sort of norms in different areas. But I also want to say, and this is an opportunity to say it, that there's a place where you can log back into your application to update and let us know if paper that you had submitted has now been accepted for publication. So unfortunately, a lot of those are in January. So if in the beginning of January, you hear that your paper has been accepted for publication, certainly go back and update that information. And you can also update with your fall term grades when you receive them in the winter.
Thanks, Sydney. I think another thing that I would also like to point out is that getting a paper is often slightly based on luck. Sometimes if you've joined a lab in your first year and you can work with them for your entire undergrad career, and then, for example, if you've left and then somehow they manage to get a paper out. So these things, they are slightly luck-based, and I do believe that the admissions committee does understand that. So yeah, that's just another thing that I wanted to point out there. So if no one has anything else to add to that, the next question, is there a specific TOEFL cutoff for MIT? And what should be a safe TOEFL score? And how much emphasis is given to TOEFL scores?
let me defer to Sydney on that.
I think it depends on who's reading your application, how much weight they give to your actual TOEFL score. But I would say if you have 105 and above, you're pretty safely demonstrating excellent English proficiency. MIT requires all incoming students whose first language is not English to take an English language test when they arrive here. English is the language we use for instructing physics, so we care about proficiency, but it is going to be variable according to the reader.
Thank you, Sydney. So if that's all that we want to say about that, then let's move on. Is it usual to be students coming right after undergrad? Can I, as a 27-year-old, be eligible to apply for a PhD and have chances of getting selected? So I think we have discussed this, and I would say yes, that you do have a chance. Be sure to write in your application not to leave any gaps, as Mason has explained. All right, so moving on to the next question. Is it common for professors in experimental areas to do some experiments themselves at MIT? So personally, I have heard of some profs who come into the lab every day. I haven't heard of a professor doing experiments themselves, but yeah, maybe Kyle can comment on that.
So I will say that my advisor, at least like pre-COVID, would definitely come into the lab a lot. But I'll also say that maybe that's not always a good thing. And I've heard of people installing fake knobs on their experiments that their advisors could turn because they didn't want their advisor to screw up their experiment because their advisor doesn't actually really, know what they're doing too much. So I will admit that I did upvote this question myself because I wanted to tell that story because it's very funny. But yes, my advisor also will take things home from lab and work on stuff in his garage or whatever too. So it's definitely a thing that happens, but yeah, that's what I'll say on that.
Thanks, Kyle. Noah?
So my advisor does write a significant portion of code himself. So I can attest to the fact that, yeah, at least my advisor is very involved in actually completing research and completing the projects that we work on.
Yeah, so I also maybe want to put a disclaimer is that I personally haven't heard of that many professors even coming into the lab. So while it's great that we hear stories being told that, professors come in, whether that's a good thing or not, it happens, although in terms of how common it is, that part, I do believe that it's not super common because professors are, of course, very busy with grant writing, teaching, and all of those responsibilities. So moving on to the next question. How can I write a winning statement of objectives and what should I include? So this one is rather personal because it does depend on, I would say, who's reading your statement. Lisa? Or something?
I was just going to say a similar thing, that it's very dependent on you personally. Like the statement of objectives is about highlighting what you've done and how you're passionate about research and why you think you're a good fit for MIT. So it's difficult to give very general advice. And this is actually part of the reason why we have this mentorship program where you can be matched with a graduate student mentor here at MIT, and you can receive sort of more personalized advice about these types of things. So I'm just going to drop that link in the chat again, and maybe Mason has some more to add.
Yeah, I guess what I'll say, just kind of encapsulating what we have been saying over the last hour or two, is that you should include everything. Well, maybe not explicitly like every single thing that's happened in your life, but you want to be talking about how you really want to go to grad school, your passion / interest in the subject that you're intending to pursue at MIT, and then talking about how your past, experiences either in research and/or in classes have helped you to kind of develop the skills that would help you, pursue those projects at MIT, but also at the same time talking about how MIT is a either great / perfect fit for you to meld your interests and also your skills into the entire process. So there's no like a winning formula per se, because at the same time, I think either Emily or Lisa said this, but different readers would also kind of emphasize different things in the statements. But what I suggested is it's generically it's sufficient. It's a good start for writing your statements.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the overall advice we can give is to write what you think makes you a good fit for MIT physics. So I think that's generally the way to go. Sydney?
I just want to point out that there's a related question coming up that asks about the difference between the statement of objectives and personal statement. And I wonder if anybody would like to take that.
Mason?
Yeah, so I can take a stab at it. So statement of objectives is really where you'll be talking about your interest in grad school, your fit into grad school, and how exactly as I was saying before, how exactly your past experiences would contribute to having a good time at MIT in a research sense. The personal statement is more to give context to your application. So for example, if there was a particularly hard time in your undergrad or in your past that you would like to kind of give context as to, maybe there was a semester that you encountered some issues at home or wherever, and you suffered or you had not great grades as a result, and you want to explain that would be a good place to give context to, only if you're comfortable with sharing the details. If you're not, please, don't feel pressured to give those details. But if you are comfortable in sharing those details, that is where you can put that information. But other things you can include in a personal statement are things like service. If you have done any leadership work in your undergrad, or if you have done any volunteer / community level organizing or any volunteer work outside of your undergrad, you're also welcome to put all of that in the personal statement.
Thanks, Mason. Noah?
I just wanted to note for generality, the way that personal statement of objectives, and statement of purpose, other names may be defined, differs from university to university. So this advice was given for MIT, whereas someone else may call a personal statement more what MIT calls the statement of objectives.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for pointing that out for sure. All right, so the next question is, should I waive the right to see my recommendation letters? So this one is funny. I did not submit this one, but personally, I think I was very confused when I got this as an international applicant. So the way that it works is basically the following. So if you would like to view your recommendation letters, your letter writers will know that when they are submitting your letter. And so the idea is that they may change some things in their letter. So I believe the general consensus is that you should waive the right to see your recommendation letter so that the admissions committee knows that your letter writer can write candidly about you. Sydney?
Thank you. I just want to emphasize that by telling you that almost no one ever waives the right to see their recommendation letters, because sometimes applicants are worried it will send a red flag of some kind. Whether that's true or not is a completely different conversation to have, but people generally do not. Or generally they waive the right to see their recommendation letters.
Yeah, I think personally when I was applying, I was pretty curious to see what my letter writers would write about me. And so I remember having to redo several of my applications when I realized what this actually meant and that, you know, no one does this basically. So that's something something to keep in mind. So the next question, do the committee members consider the rank of the university that we are coming from, or are they just focused on the quality of our CV and statement of purpose? Mason?
So let me at the outset to say that this is not the official stance of the admissions committee, but I will say that the rank of the university is something I don't really care too much about. It's more of a privilege thing and resource, access to resources thing, more so than the quality of the university per se. So with that, on the second question, we do focus, well, at least the student readers and a couple more members on the committee, we focus more on the quality of your, CV, statement of objectives, your personal statement, the whole package essentially.
Thank you, Mason. So our time is running out, so maybe we can just address a couple more questions. So how important is the GRE to the application this year? So not only is the GRE not accepted this year, but so not only is it not optional, but it's just not accepted this year because there are issues due to access and things like that. So Mason, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, yeah, I mean, we are not accepting it, so there's nothing else to add to that.
Okay, thanks.
If submitted, it won't be able to be seen.
Thank you, Sydney. Okay, so next question. What is the difference between your statement of objectives and personal statements? So I think we have addressed this one, so maybe we can just move on. So if 4 letters of recommendation are available, would it help an application significantly compared to the standard 3 letters? And would reviewers look at the 4th letter? Mason?
I personally would just look at the 4th one just to see what it would add. The thing that I'll emphasize is, just make sure that whoever you're asking for recommendations from professors or from either from research or from classes, make sure they're able to write you a strong letter of reference.
Absolutely. Sydney?
And just be aware that not everyone will be able to or will choose to read the 4th letter. And we don't know which letter will be the 4th. So if there's some letter that's vitally important to you, sending 4 may create a situation where people don't read it.
Thanks, Sydney. Kyle, did you have something to add?
Well, I thought I did, but then what Sydney said changed it. So I used it as I kind of had 4 professors that I was thinking about, and most schools only accepted 3, so I put 3, and then MIT had the option to put the 4th, so I put the 4th. But maybe based on what Sydney said, that's, I don't know, somewhat less advisable. But I don't know. I did not know that when I applied, for sure.
All I'm saying is that there's no guarantee that everyone will read all 4 letters. So you just need to be aware of that when you put your application together.
Yeah, it's a good point.
All right, thanks everyone. So unfortunately, I think our time is now up. So if everyone can please go to the following link and drop some feedback for us. If they have anything they have in mind that they would like for us to do better for next time, please share that with us. I would also like to remind everyone that we will have a second webinar in 2 months' time. So please sign up for that one if you have any more questions that come up during the application process. We'd definitely like to address those questions as well. So we do have a lot of remaining questions from today's session, and so we'll make an effort to address those within the next few days, but please, be patient with us because there are a lot of questions. And so, yeah, I think that wraps up for today. Oh, Also, be sure to check out the department website because we have instructions for the mentorship program that we have already mentioned. So basically that will just pair prospective applicants with current graduate students, and we can help you out with your application if you feel like you need it. And if you have some additional questions, maybe some quick questions that you feel like the mentorship program is not needed for you, then please feel free to drop us an email. The email is phys-grad@MIT, and this link will also be available on the department website. So please take a look at the department website because there's a lot of information and resources for you there to help with your application. So thanks everyone for coming, and I'd like to thank my wonderful panelists for taking their time out today to help with today's event. So thank you. And thank you to Sydney for basically helping keep the department running. So thank you very much.